Welcome to Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. I'm Tammi Mack, and tonight we are talking about President Joe Biden's race to arm Ukraine with more weapons and aid, why the Florida Senate voted to dissolve Disney's power of self-government, the controversial video of police officers detaining an 8-year-old boy, and what rapper Future had to say about having more children. Let's get down to business. The business of being Black. Today is another round of political and trending highlights of the week. Please welcome my Friday co-host, the co-founder of the Anti-Racism Kentucky Coalition, Dr. O.J. Oleka.
Hey, Tammi Mack.
Activist and radio personality, Dominique DePrima.
Hey, Tammi, what's up?
Hey, political analyst, Ed Sanders. Hi, Ed.
Hey, guys. Hey, Tammi.
And comedian and filmmaker, Alicia Cooper. What's up, Alicia?
Happy Friday, Tammi. Hey.
Happy Friday. Let's dive into the South Side. Florida is where we're taking a trip to right now. Florida, I'm sorry, maybe we're not taking a trip to Florida right now. My bad. Let's go directly to President Joe Biden. Joe Biden said that the U.S. would give another $1.3 billion in military and humanitarian aid to Ukraine, but that additional funding will soon be needed from Congress to maintain the flow of weapons. Now, as we approach the 2-month mark, what are your thoughts regarding Biden's support for Ukraine? And could that prompt World War III? Is that what we've been looking at all this time? Ed.
World War III. No, I don't think it's that. But, I think everyone looking at it wants to see the violence in the Ukraine stop. So, I mean, first things first, let's finding a way to get the Russian aggression to halt is key. Now, how you go about doing that is I think where the debate is. I think most Americans are opposed to troops on the ground and want to find ways to support the Ukrainians without putting American lives at risk. And I think the president is moving to do that. It's been successful thus far. I think what we're seeing is that the Ukrainians are pushing back the Russians in key battles as long as they've been supplied with weapons from NATO. I think ultimately a lot of us are also looking at what the ultimate cost of this is. We just came out of 2 wars in Afghanistan and Iraq that cost this country a lot of money that could be spent at home. Certainly we look at schools and hospitals and the cost of living here in the American and in the United States and want to find ways to better our lives as well.
Yeah, Dr. Oleka?
Well, I think Ed makes a lot of good points in terms of we need to figure out exactly what success looks like here from an American perspective. I mean, look, obviously, everyone wants the bloodshed to stop. Everyone wants Russian aggression to stop, as Ed said. But when you start giving billions and billions and billions of dollars away, the American people need to have a say in this. And so I think when Congress takes a look, they need to first define what is success from an American perspective and then attach strings that way. Because as Ed said, you could be spending that money here at home, or quite frankly, you could not be spending that money at all. I mean, we have terrible deficits. We have tremendous debt. So if we could not spend money or put it towards something that could be beneficial for our own home economy, that could be useful as well.
Dominique?
Yeah, this is a tricky situation because the people of the Ukraine are dealing with such a horrifying situation to be invaded by a powerful neighbor, the atrocities that we're seeing on the ground, the loss of life, the war crimes, to be frank. It's terrible. And I also think Dr. Oleka and Ed Sanders are making crucial points because we just said we don't have enough money to extend the child tax credit, throwing 4 million American children back into hunger from one year to the next. Last year they had food. This year we say we can't afford to help feed them through a tax credit, right? And so if we don't have that money to feed American children, it's hard to justify billions and billions. And the way our system works, sadly, there are atrocities going on in conflicts all over the world. Many of them we do have a hand in. So how do we prioritize one over the other? And why is it that we just turn on the spigot when it comes to war? But when it comes to, saving our planet, Happy Earth Day, the greening of our economy, when it comes to of our infrastructure, when it comes to feeding our own children, suddenly we're tightwads.
So, Dominique, let's speak to that a little bit. Do you think that there is money allotted for the military that supersedes the money that's allotted for other things domestically? And that's why they have the funds to be able to do that. There's always money there to allotted for war.
Okay, so there's two things happening. Joe Biden just passed the biggest military budget in recent history, more than the Pentagon asked for, more than anyone expected. Like the Pentagon always takes way too much of the US budget, in my opinion. We should have a peacetime budget where we're investing in the American people rather than constantly feeding the military industrial complex. But when you talk about these wars, whether it be Iraq or whether it be Afghanistan, or in this case, Ukraine, these are emergency funds that are outside of the regular Pentagon budget for the most part. So we just open up this spigot, and that's how we ended up spending between 1 and 12 trillion, depending on who you ask. In Afghanistan, 1 in 12 trillion. We could transform American cities. We could end homelessness and hunger in this country with that kind of money. So it becomes about your priorities. And that's why I think we need to vote a peace agenda instead of a war machine agenda, which is what we typically do.
Well, when men are running things, it's kind of what happens. War. Alicia, how do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, everybody made all the great points. While we still have people living on the streets in the U.S. and we're in a deep deficit here, I understand that they're in dire straits. I can't even watch it. I don't watch it. It's too much. We have atrocities happening right here that's already triggering me. So I certainly can't watch that. But yeah, we have so much right here that needs funds that are not being given. So we should help them as much as we can, but we also have to prioritize what's happening in the U.S. right now because we're in straits as well.
Speaking of being triggered, this may trigger you. On Thursday, Congress ruled 8-1. The Supreme Court ruled 8-1 that certain federal benefits can exclude residents who live in U.S. territories such as Puerto Rico. One case includes Social Security income available to those living in the 50 states older than 65, blind or disabled, that financially excludes residents of Puerto Rico and other U.S. territories. Is this fair for the Supreme Court to treat residents of those territories differently than people who live in other territories? Dominique, let's start with you.
Well, I mean, Puerto Rico is a great example. It's like this weird hybrid. You're Americans, you can vote, but you don't have a representative in the Senate. You don't have representatives in the Congress. We need to just go on and make Puerto Rico a state or let them be completely independent as a nation. Whether we're talking about taxation without representation or without adequate representation, or whether we're just talking about tricky ways to cut off people of color, people who are under-resourced by coming up with these little rules and regulations. No, of course it's not fair, Tammi Mack, and it reflects upon the inequities that are perpetuated by our Congress. That's why I would say give Puerto Rico statehood or let them be a nation separate and apart from us with their own little reparations package. And, you could say the same about DC. Let them be a state or let them go.
Yeah. Ed.
I think I agree with Dominique on that. It's a question, and it raises the question of what is an American, right? And what is the value in being an American? When we look at a lot of the territories, they're rooted in islands that, from an era past where you needed a Navy outpost. Now they seem to be treated as second-class citizens, sort of burdens on the American economy. Justice Kavanaugh wrote in his opinion on this, because it was the Supreme Court ruling, I think 8-1, that, they're exempted from federal income tax. And because of that, these residents and citizens of the territories, it's okay to exclude, them from the SSI program. Sonia Sotomayor, who's one of my favorite justices, says that, when you look at some of the other states like South Dakota, North Dakota, Vermont, and Alaska that don't pay as much federal income tax as other states, maybe we should start excluding some of the benefits that come to those states as well.
Interesting. Dr. Oleka.
Well, with all due respect to Justice Sotomayor, she's wrong in her interpretation of the law here, because it's very explicit in terms of the Constitution, Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2, which is referenced in the territories, Congress is able to determine whatever rules and regulations they would like regarding territories. The SSI benefits, supplemental security income, which was passed by the Congress in 1972, signed by Nixon, explicitly says that that benefit is only for the 50 states and Washington, D.C., and later was added another island, but not Puerto Rico. So Puerto Rico residents just don't have access to these particular benefits. But the thing that's interesting here is that Justice Gorsuch, who was an appointee by Trump, effectively said that the insular cases, it was a set of cases in the early 20th century that a lot of this legal precedent is based on. He said those were based in racism and racial stereotypes, and they ought to be completely removed from the jurisprudence conversation that we're having on this. So we'll see where this goes, but there seems to be partisan support figuring out what the people of Puerto Rico need and deserve.
Yeah. Alicia, you want to get in real quick?
It was,
Paper towels.
yeah, they were saying that because Puerto Ricans don't pay most federal taxes, that was pretty much the crux of why they were voting the way that they voted. And their cost of living is 50% less than Washington, D.C., New York City, San Francisco, places like that. And it's 6% lower than, the U.S. period. So they were talking about one guy who was making $800 a month or $840 a month, something like that, when he lived in New York City, and he moved to Puerto Rico, and they lowered it down to $84 a month because they were saying that, I guess the cost of living and the lack of federal taxes paid. But I felt like if you left Puerto Rico and moved anywhere in the U.S., you get your full pay.
Let's take a quick break on that full pay so I can get mine on Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. Welcome back to Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. Let's get down to business. The Business of Being Black today is another round of political and trending highlights of the week. Please welcome the co-founder of the Anti-Racism Kentucky Coalition, Dr. O.J. Oleka, activist and radio personality Dominique DePrima, political analyst Ed Sanders, and comedian and filmmaker Alicia Cooper. So let's move on to Vice President Harris. She's pushing to make Black maternal health a national priority. During a call with journalists covering Black Maternal Health Week, Harris mentioned that Black women are 3 times more likely to die in connection with childbirth. She said investments in the latest federal budget proposal include, for example, about $500 million to reduce maternal mortality and mortality rates. And there will also be proposed funding toward the implementation of implicit bias training for healthcare providers and more. Let's talk about the maternal health disparities that exist among Black women and the importance of that initiative. My thing about this is, I don't know that people always say training, but I don't know that bias training is something you can't really reverse what's in somebody's mind, what's in their head. And most women who have suffered from this say that it is explicitly because and only because they are Black. Serena Williams has said it. Beyonce has said it. Tatiana Ali has said it. So there is definitely bias going on when it comes to the caring of Black mothers. Why is this, Dominique?
Well, if Serena Williams is getting mistreated, the average person can just forget it, right? So, and it is shameful because if you look at the death rates of Black women during childbirth, it's like a developing country. There's just no excuse for it. I do think it has to do with bias. We need more Black doctors. We have seen studies that show that we have better outcomes for babies and small infants, toddlers, in their health outcomes when they have Black doctors. And they don't even know why exactly. I think better resources and better access to healthcare throughout the pregnancy journey, right? The prenatal piece. And then this issue that many municipalities, I know they're doing it in New York City, is taking up of training doulas. And many of them are African-American. Doula is someone who helps you during childbirth and immediately after you have your baby to make sure that you know what you're doing. I mean, it sounds like we should all automatically know, but we don't. I had a doula and it was a godsend for me. My baby came early and I was like, oh my God, I'm going to break him. And having a doula really made a difference for me. And so I think that kind of thing, which involves more people of color, more culturally competent people into the process is important.
Yeah, and the Black Infant Health Organization, specifically in Los Angeles, in California, I should say, are really doing a good job about getting the word out about doulas. They're providing free doulas for families that can't afford it. And doulas are, they're advocates for the mother. Because I think what people forget is that when you are having a baby, that's a pretty stressful moment, I would say. Dominique, wouldn't you say it's a pretty stressful moment?
Yeah, and we don't have any training for it. Like, you know me, Tammy, I read the articles, I read the books. I remember when my water broke and I was like, but Mom, the book says I don't. My mom was like, put down the book and go to the hospital. Like, there is no manual that comes with your body or with your brain to navigate hospitals and all of the, when a doctor tells you no, we're trained to respect the white coat instead of advocate for ourselves. And that's where those doulas and midwives and other Black professionals can really make a difference.
Yeah, yeah. Alicia, how do you feel about our vice president taking on this business? I'm actually happy to see it.
I'm very happy to see it. I think she made a misstep early on when she said, I'm not going to do anything that's only going to benefit Black people. No, because I'm like, don't say that, don't say that, because you'd have made a whole bunch of Black people mad. And there might be some things that you do that will benefit us. And this is an example of that. And I feel like it's very important. Black women are over 3 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related complications than white women. And my mother was a Renaissance woman. My pediatrician growing up in the DC area, he was Black. So all my doctors have been Black. So just to try to cut down on a lot of this bias and stuff that goes on in the medical profession, maybe sometimes the solution might be a doctor that looks like you. But it doesn't, like we said, it doesn't matter how much money you have. We've seen rich African-American women deal with the same thing. So it's not a matter of economics. It's a matter of the way that our pain is not taken seriously. And, everything that involves us is always questioned. So I'm just glad she's taking this on. This is very important.
Ed.
Yeah, I agree with everyone. There's almost no more vulnerable point in a woman's life than when she's delivering a baby and the aftermath of that. I look at the response though, and I wish it were more. It's one thing to raise awareness, and that certainly is one thing. But I think there's more that we can do. It would be interesting to know what hospitals, what doctors are suffering, higher rates of mothers dying under their care. Because you've got to get down into the weeds.
Ed. Oh, that's such a good point.
You've got to get into the weeds to understand what is not being done. And, I've looked around on the topic and you see studies and studies, but you really got to get down in the weeds. We've done this in the banking industry when we noticed that African Americans weren't getting loans. We had, the CRA come forward and track that sort of data. And we should do the same thing here.
And I never, going back to what Alicia said when Vice President Kamala Harris said, I'm not going to only do things for Black people. I never understand why candidates ask for the votes of Black people and then are so implicit about how they're not going to only do things for Black people, but they've only done things for other ethnicities. It's just a weird comment to make. It's a weird way of thinking. Why wouldn't we need things done for us only? I mean, we're the only people who built America. We're the only people who were enslaved by America. We're the only people who had to suffer through Jim Crow. I just never understand why we can't be the only people to get some sort of relief from America. Go ahead, Ed. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dr. Oleka.
I think the points that everybody has made are absolutely 100% correct. And again, to look at this from a conservative perspective, we say we are the party of life. There are women who are committing to bringing children into this world who are not surviving. That is an absolute problem that we need to respond to. I think Ed is 100% correct. If you have doctors who are habitually causing women to die because they're not paying attention to them, Black women, they need to have their licenses revoked and they need to go to prison. It was something that I tried to push for last year in Kentucky. We weren't able to get it all the way successful, but we did get something with regard to maternal mortality. And something to point out here, there are a couple of studies I want to bring our soulmates' attention to. One, there was a study that showed that white doctors believe that Black patients can tolerate pain at higher levels. That was the first one. Second, obviously, is a study that points out that maternal mortality is higher among Black women. So you include those things with what Dominique said about the cultural competencies. Black women they had to have been strong their entire lives. Since Black women were little girls, they said, you've got to be strong, you've got to show strength. So now imagine that you are a Black woman who has been pregnant. It's a painful, hard thing to experience, and you're about to give birth, and that's painful and hard, but you've been taught your whole life you have to be strong. And so you may not even know that the pain that you are experiencing is not a normal pain. It is not a regular pregnancy pain, but it is one that can cause you to die. But because of what this country has told you and what society has told you, you have to be stronger than everybody else. And you might have a doctor who looks at you and says, well, she can handle the pain anyway. And so as a result, you lose your life and your child loses a mother because we are not paying attention to our Black women. So we absolutely need to take this more seriously. And I applaud this vice president, the only Black woman we've ever had in the role, to bring attention to this. It's her job. It's her obligation. It is her duty. And I'm thankful that she's doing it.
And, people are always talking about why we have to bring slavery back up, why we got to go way back there. But this is an inherited thought process of the oppressor. It really is, because our slave owners did not think of Black people as humans. They automatically thought that we could handle anything. I mean, we were branded, for crying out loud. We were branded. And so that thought process has continued throughout history, right up until a woman bears a child in her most vulnerable position, as Ed points out, where she can't even speak for herself in a way that someone would believe her. It's a horrible situation, but it's fantastic that Vice President Kamala Harris has decided to take this one on. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. I'm Tammi Mack. On Thursday, the Florida legislature gave final passage on a bill that would strip Disney of its self-governing status amid the political clash between the company and Governor Ron DeSantis. Disney CEO publicly criticized Florida lawmakers for passing what opponents call the Don't Say Gay bill and apologized to the company's LGBTQ plus community, or rather employees, for not being a stronger advocate. Disney's special district will be dissolved on June 1st, 2023. Wow. What are your thoughts on this story, Alicia?
Well, I mean, don't mess with that mouse, because I don't think DeSantis is going to get reelected just from this alone, because from what I'm understanding, the property taxes are going to go up for Florida residents. A lot of things that they've been getting benefits on are going to go away, and financially they're going to take a big hit based off of his petulance about something that should have never been proposed in the first place. So I'm Team Disney, and I'm glad that the CEO is standing up for the workers and for the residents of that state.
How do you feel, Dr. Oleka?
Well, I think it's important for soulmates to understand the beginning portion of how we even got to this point. Tammi Mack, as you laid out, it was the Disney CEO who decided to be engaged in a political battle. This bill that was being discussed, it is a parental rights bill, which explicitly says that school teachers in Florida cannot teach about sexuality and gender identity in kindergarten to third grade. So what the bill says is that if you're teaching some kid who's 6 or 7 or 5, you can't talk to them about sexuality or gender identity. As a parent, I don't think this is very controversial. Those are things that kids should learn at home.
But,
so the Disney CEO
I have to say this. No one was teaching sexuality in schools. So why did we even need such a law, really?
Well,
I mean,
again,
this is definitely a cover-up for something else.
It's not a cover for something else. I think it's important, again, for soulmates to understand. Teachers have the opportunity to use curriculum to teach what they want to teach, unless there's a specific law that says that they can't. And so the concern among parents in Florida and other states, Kentucky is one of them, is that teachers are using the opportunity to effectively indoctrinate students on social ideology with regard to gender identity in regard to sexuality. This just doesn't need to happen in schools, kindergarten through third grade, where it's not age appropriate. That's what the bill does. The Disney CEO
Nobody's doing that. No teachers are doing that.
The teachers are doing that, Tammi Mack. The teachers are doing this in Florida. They're doing it across the country. As a result, Florida passed a bill. The Disney CEO decided that he wanted to get involved and say this was the wrong thing. And so the General Assembly said, well, if you're going to get involved in Florida politics is going to get involved with you. And as a result, they lost their special tax status. This is entirely on Disney. Disney did this to themselves. Had they just focused on providing a great entertainment experience for folks at Disney World, then they'd still have their special status.
Yeah.
I'm shocked. I mean, last segment you gave an impassioned speech about Black mothers, and really what we're talking about is getting past hatred. And what you see in Governor DeSantis is it's pure hatred. The only reason to advance that sort of legislation in the first place is so that he can stand up and say that I'm anti-gay. To Tammy's point, it's not in effect in that age group and in classrooms. I mean, there's no instruction. What there is, the only thing that is happening is that where you see kids that are being bullied, you can go on any campus and there are kids that are like, that person is, gay, or that person, they have a negative connotation on some words that certain populations would feel offended by. And if you correct that, then you're out of bounds of the law. And that there's nothing wrong with what was already happening. What DeSantis is doing is trying to legislate on hate. And for that, he should be ashamed. The Republican Party in Florida should be ashamed. Disney's absolutely right to stand up to that. I applaud when corporations stand up. This is, when you get corporations that stand up against, foolishness like this, it makes this country better.
Dominique.
Where to start? First of all, the bill does say that you can't talk about this, not just that you can't teach it. Second of all, most schools have very narrow and specific curriculum, and teachers just can't do whatever they want. This is like a new boogeyman. It's like critical gay theory, right? The problem is, say you are a non-binary kid or an LGBTQ kid. Now we're not allowed to talk about it. We're not allowed to say what your pronouns are. We're not allowed to even have a conversation in the classroom. That is discriminatory. Second of all, whenever you hear Dr. O.J. Oleka say, what the soulmates need to understand is he's getting ready to drop some Republican talking points, because the fact of the matter is all corporations are involved with politics. That's why they hire lobbyists. That's why they give money to politicians on both sides of the aisle. And that is what corporations do. They lobby and engage in politics to their advantage. You just don't like the politics of this particular engagement on the part of Disney. And I would add that the employees of Disney, not just the LGBTQ plus ones, but those who stands against discrimination, pushed the company into this. It was the Disney creatives and the Disney employees that made the company take a stronger stand. And that's why the CEO apologized, because they were dragging their feet for a long, long time. So to say that everything would be just plain and dandy if they stayed out of politics, it's disingenuous. Corporations are political players. That's why they do corporate donations, and that's why they favor certain policies and politicians.
I do enjoy when Dr. Oleka refers to our soulmates as soulmates. I love how he calls them by their name. So I appreciate that. Dr. Oleka, you want to respond?
I would like to respond. And also, I want to make sure our soulmates are aware of what is happening here.
The three of you should follow suit on that now. You should follow suit.
There you go. I mean, look, the reality is this. The bill explicitly says that teachers in Florida cannot encourage conversation and use it to teach with regard to sexuality and gender identity.
But that's not all it says.
Through third grade. That is explicitly what it says. Those of us who have read the bill can tell you exactly what it says. Those of us who have been classroom teachers can tell you the latitude that teachers have in the classroom. I have been a teacher. I have read the bill. What is important for everybody to understand here is that this kind of thing does happen within schools. In Kentucky, there was a school teacher who pushed the idea that kids should go to a summer camp where they can learn about sexuality and gender identity in elementary school. There is a curriculum out there for kindergartners that asks kids to create a rainbow flag with regard to the LGBTQ community and select pronouns and not tell their parents about it and choose different ones in different days. If this is what you decide to do as an adult, that's fine. If there's an age-appropriate conversation in high school, that's fine. But if I am a parent, which I am, I do not want a teacher telling my elementary school kid that they can choose a pronoun when I have not had that conversation with them. That is what this bill is preventing in Florida, and it is kindergarten through third grade. So anybody who defends the bill says that they support the idea of a teacher over a parent having conversations in a classroom when the parent is not present about sexuality and gender identity. That's just not appropriate. Floridians, I think, agree. And I think they're going to reelect Ron DeSantis for doing things just like this.
They are going to reelect Ron DeSantis, and he is making his strides into the presidency, of course. But I have to push back on that one example you gave, Dr. Oleka. I just don't believe that that's happening in school districts, grades kindergarten through third grade, that there is a curriculum that teaches about sexuality. But however, I would like to say, why didn't we create this law when there were teachers who were saying, oh, no, Johnny, you can't play with dolls. Oh, no, Johnny, you can't wear a dress. That's discriminatory too. That's talking about sexuality too.
Well, I would respectfully disagree there. And this is, I think, where the conversation gets difficult and nuanced. Playing with a doll or wearing a dress is based on what we think society currently today says a specific gender should do. 100 years ago, little boys were wearing clothes that had long flowing, you call them skirts, but that's what they were. But what we changed over time was that we said that this is explicitly for girls. Boys play with action figures, girls play with dolls. That is a decision that parents can make. If they want to do something else, they can. But what I think is happening, what is happening in schools, is that teachers are saying, if you do those things, if you play with dolls and you're a boy, then maybe, in fact, you're a girl. That's just not a conversation, kindergarten through third grade, that a teacher should have. It's a conversation that a parent should have.
Look, 100 years ago, we were legislating that little white kids couldn't play with little black kids.
Are you really going to make the
just seems like
comparison about little boys being able to wear long dresses in race? Come on, Ed.
No.
Well, race is instructive when you think about all these figures that do.
Welcome back to Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. I'm Tammi Mack. Ed, let's jump in here. You were comparing little boys playing with toys to little white boys playing with little black boys. How does that compare, Dr. Oleka says? How dare you?
Yeah, and it does. I mean, like, again, when you look at the motivation behind what Ron DeSantis was legislating, it's rooted in him saying that, you know, my way of life is the only way of life that should be taught to kids. And, you know, those that live a different lifestyle, we don't want that being taught anywhere near our kids. And you know, understand that for us soulmates who understand American history, that argument was used against us. That was the whole argument that we had to fight against to desegregate schools and society here. And so to see DeSantis doing it again, particularly towards the LGBT community, is somewhat disgusting. But tomorrow it'll be another community that he chooses to ostracize.
I think it is patently absurd and false to compare racial segregation in schools to saying that teachers cannot teach kids about sexuality and gender identity in the kindergarten through third grade.
Well, we're having the argument in schools now about critical race theory.
There's nothing.
And not only that, that is not all that bill does. Gay, transgender, gay. There, I said it.
Okay, congratulations for that, Dominique.
Yeah. But what happens if you already had that conversation with your parents, that you know that you're, transgender, or you know that you're non-binary. Now your pronoun is they, but the teacher can't call you that. They can't explain to the other kids why you're they and not he or she. Now you're going to be misgendered. You're going to be called by the wrong name. And that is problematic because that is hurtful to those children. And that's not okay. You're saying it's okay to inflict trauma on LGBTQ plus teachers so that you can create this, so you can stay within the Republican reality of what America looks like and what the world looks like, which is not the actual real world.
No, that is absolutely false, Dominique. And again, when you
and
look
our
at the
soulmates
bill,
need to understand.
Well, when you actually read the bill, which I have done, I encourage our soulmates to do. When you actually have, what you'll see is that it says encouraging this kind of conversation about sexuality and gender identity in the classroom. So let's take your very real example, Dominique, because I think it's important. You're a kid who has this conversation at home with your parent. You decide that you are confused about where you are on the gender identity.
No, that's not what I said. You know that you're non-binary. Let's not say we're confused. Let's say you're an actual non-binary person.
You start out confused. If you want to say that this student,
maybe you
has reached the conclusion that they are something different, fine. You can use the language you want to use. My point is, what they can do is have this conversation with the school counselor. They can have it with their teacher, one-on-one, because even if you feel a certain way about yourself, it doesn't mean you're comfortable with other kids in the classroom doing it. It doesn't mean that those kids and those parents feel comfortable with the teacher having the conversation, because those parents have no idea the perspective that that teacher will
So now
offer
you're imposing your values on that child.
No,
that
Dominique,
child has
it's
to
not
be
a
called
values
he
question.
when they're really she, or she when they're
Not a
really
values
he.
question.
That's
It's a
not,
question
that's you
about what a
imposing
teacher
your
is
political
able to do.
agenda on a 5-year-old.
It's not a political agenda.
Yes, it is.
This is what
Absolutely.
teachers are
What the
able to do.
soulmates need to understand that this is absolutely a political agenda.
Well,
it is absolutely.
It's not a political agenda. What is happening is that the legislature is saying that you can't have these kinds of conversations. Again, I'm pretty sure I'm the only one in this conversation who's
Censorship,
actually been a
muzzling.
teacher
Okay.
to know exactly what teachers can and cannot do in a classroom. This is the last thing I'll say on this. If you are that student, you can have the conversation with your teacher, with a counselor, with other people. What this bill says is that you cannot have the conversation from a teacher perspective with regard to curriculum and encouraging it with regard to sexuality and gender identity. It is not explicit to the LGBTQ community. If there was a student who's 6 and they say, I like girls and I'm a boy, it's still inappropriate for the teacher to encourage that kind of conversation in school.
So
She just have to decide
that
if you are on the side of parents or on the side of the left-wing activists and their talking points, as Dominique loves to bring up.
I think the far more likely example of this is actually on the playground with kids bullying other kids and the language that kids use.
That's not included in the bill, Ed.
Well, how do you deal with that if you're a teacher?
You have a
You
conversation
do that on the yard. How do you deal with that?
As I pointed out, again, I've actually done these kinds of things as a teacher.
Sure. So how would you deal with it?
Me. You have the conversation with the teacher, and you have the conversation with the counselor, and you have the conversation with the students who are doing the bullying. Because the issue at hand, based on what you've just said, is not about sexuality and gender identity. It is about bullying. Bullying is the problem.
Bullying over sexual identity.
Right.
The thing that
So basically, Dr. Oleka, you're saying that this is something you already put into place. You didn't need a law for it.
What I'm saying is that this explicitly prevents teachers having conversations about sexuality and sexual identity in a classroom. As in, when I'm supposed to be learning about coloring, or supposed to be learning how to read, I should not be being taught by a teacher when I'm in kindergarten through 3rd grade about sexuality and sexual identity and gender identity. What happens on the playground, if it's bullying, that can be addressed in a different way.
What happens on the playground stays on the playground.
I mean, that's the far more likely scenario is kids are calling each other,
We'll move on. Syracuse police are investigating a video that has gone viral of an 8-year-old boy being detained and put in a patrol car after allegedly stealing a bag of potato chips. We've got a clip. Take a look at this. It's very hard to look at.
What are y'all doing? What is y'all doing?
Guess. Take a guess what I'm doing.
Hey, you're like a baby to me. Why you?
Guess what I'm doing.
I don't know what you doing. I just see you snatching him up off the.
No.
So what? So what's going on then?
You're stealing stuff. If he breaks into your house to steal something.
Nah, man. What is that? A bag of chips? So y'all treat me like a whole cold-blooded killer?
It's very hard to watch that because it's just very hard to watch that. They have traumatized that little boy over a bag of chips, whether he did it or whether he didn't do it. And my thing is, I can see visually in my head that being a little white boy and them calling his parents. That's what I see visually. And if you can't tell that there's a difference here, then how we're treated, then how other ethnicities are treated, then you just are not paying attention to the world. Alicia?
Yeah, I mean, and even if you look at the language that the cop used, he was like, if he breaks into your house and steals something, how do we make the leap from a bag of chips
How?
to breaking into your house?
How do we do that?
Mentality of these police officers, and they don't need to be on the streets, and they don't need to have access to little children because they don't have the right frame of mind. That was a leap they would have never made for a little blonde-haired white boy taking some potato chips. We go from chips to breaking into your home. So it just shows you how they feel about the community at large. And we are punished 50 times harsher than anybody else. And this is just evident. And to make that little boy cry like that, and then they didn't blur his face out. One thing I was glad about was they didn't actually cuff him. They did hold his hands behind his back. I was pleasantly surprised about that. But, now they said they took him home and they talked to his father. At least this opens up a dialogue between the 8-year-old and his parents. but I definitely feel like that was a heavy-handed and over the top. 3 cops, the man video and said they knocked him off his bike. I'm like, all this over some potato chips? So I just feel like they're taking out their aggressions on a vulnerable population, and that was overkill. That was not necessary for the infraction that had happened. Now, if he had actually broken into somebody's house, I would understand that level of aggression, but it was over the top, and I'm glad that it was recorded.
Dominique?
He broke into your house. He's a little kid, for goodness sakes. I mean, we talk about building trust between police and community. That kid is never going to trust a cop again in his life. And all of the kids that watched those cops do that to him are never going to trust a cop. And I think it's worth noting, I agree with everything Alicia said, but this is codified into the system. This is systemic racism. This is why the same training creates different results depending on who you are policing. So more and more and more money for training is not the answer, because those same cops, as you just pointed out, Tammi Mack, would not do the same thing to a little white child. They just wouldn't. So it's not about the training. It's about the way that system is set up and how it deals with Black people in general and Black children most egregiously. As a mom, it enrages me, to be honest.
And the number of police officers that were there for an 8-year-old boy.
Right.
I mean, the number of them, like, did it really take all of that manpower for an 8-year-old? And you know, if you're a police officer, all police officers know everybody's scared of y'all, and particularly Black people.
Well, you got a gun. Let's start
We
there.
are always afraid of the police. So you can imagine just rolling up on those little boys, how fearful and how frightening that might have been. And I'm glad that the little boy didn't take off running, because Lord knows where he would be by now. Let's take a quick break. We'll come back and talk about it. Welcome back to Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. I'm Tammi Mack. Sadly, the show is about to come to an end, but we still got some topics on deck. The mandatory mask mandate for travelers on planes and other public forms of transportation has been lifted. I have to say, since we received this story, the mandate for California has gone back into effect. So, just in case you didn't know. But several videos are making their rounds on social media showing people reacting with joy as they sat on airplanes minus their mask for the first time in more than 2 years. Take a look at some of these clips of the people, y'all, the people.
The Biden administration announced that the Transportation Security Administration will no longer enforce the federal mandate requiring masks in all U.S. airports and on-board aircraft.
Just for that, I want the mask mandate back. Because listen, I don't need you blowing your hot breath all on me singing a song on the airplane, because you're just bringing COVID about. It's just shut up the whole flight. Please bring the mask mandates back. The White House says the CDC continues to recommend wearing masks on public transit. How do you feel? Are y'all comfortable with this mask removal? How you feeling?
I'm not comfortable, especially after watching those videos. All I saw was COVID flying through the air.
That's all I saw.
I will keep my mask on. I'm happy that everybody else is happy, but it's compressed air on an airplane, and public transportation already got some questionable looking folks on it as it is. So I'm keeping my mask on.
Now, you're wrong about the questionable looking folks. Obama had COVID, so Dominique, are you wearing your mask? Or are you good?
I wear it in a tightly packed place like an airplane, for sure. A big international flight with people bringing germs from all over the world, for sure. And I hope we don't have another outbreak now that everyone's so happy to spread their germs.
Yeah, I thought we had learned lessons. Nobody's washing their groceries anymore. Nobody's washing their hands. All the masks are being removed. We're like, oh, we free. But I'm thinking, did we learn anything? Can we continue to wash our hands? Can we continue to be 6 feet away? Please get away from me, Dr. Oleka.
That's why COVID started to begin with, Tammi. Nobody was washing nothing. Now we're right back where we started from.
Right back to the beginning. Come full circle,
Well,
Dr. Oleka.
Yes, I agree. People should wash their hands. I hate that was a lesson that people had to learn 2 years ago, but I mean, I'm glad that they did, some of them, and I hope that people will continue to do that. I mean, I'm fine with the mask mandate going away. I'm not even certain that the CDC had the authority to begin with. I guess the Supreme Court will tell us this in the end. But I think it's fine. Again, people have gotten vaccinated if they have chosen to do so. We've had 2 years now to figure out what people want to do and how they want to respond to COVID. So I'm fine with it.
Ed?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think, the number of people that have now been vaccinated, or they at least had the opportunity to get vaccinated, for me, when I travel, I'm going to wear a mask on a plane. I like Dominique to sit on a plane for a couple hours, especially if you're going to Florida. I'm going to need that mask. But yeah, in public areas, that's fine.
Mike Tyson took off his mask and whooped some ass, didn't he? I'm telling you. So let's move on to Trey Songz. He's been slapped with a new $5 million suit over allegedly exposing a woman's breast against her will. And this time, there is reportedly video footage. The accuser, Megan Johnson, claims Trey Songz groped and exposed her breast at a party almost 9 years ago. At least 12 women have made several assault claims against Songz. Johnson claims the incident caused lasting damage, including severe emotional distress, self-harm. Her team strongly believes that the alleged assault being captured on film makes their case a guaranteed win. What are your thoughts about these new Trey Songz allegations? I mean, we're kind of treating Trey Songz like R. Kelly a little bit, in the sense of everybody knew R. Kelly was doing this, but nobody said anything and nothing was done about it. And this has been years now that we've been hearing these things about Trey Songz. And now it's time to ask, when will people start believing, and when will some things start happening and charges take place with Trey Songz? How long will it take a surviving Trey Songz for it to happen, Alicia?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, he's going to have to pay the lady, especially since it's on tape this time. And then all the other people, they're going to get paid too. He's got to learn you have to keep your hands to yourself, And 9 years ago, there was no Me Too and Time's Up and all that stuff. So now with these new movements, it's not looking good for him. I don't know about the tune of $5 million, but he's definitely going to have to pay up. Keep your hands to yourself.
Ed?
I couldn't say it any better than Alicia. You're going to keep your hands to yourself.
Yeah. A lot of people were commenting that the young lady was laughing in the video when he, removed the swimsuit to expose her breast. But I have to say, as a woman myself, a lot of times we do laugh. It's a nervous laugh. It's a laugh of uncomfortability. It's not a laugh of, ha ha, I'm in agreement with this. Right, Dominique?
Yeah, and it's always problematic when the same kind of charges keep coming up over and over again. I think we have to ask ourselves why we try to blame the woman and say, oh, well, she was laughing. Yeah, sometimes you go along to get along. Sometimes you think it'll make it go away if you play it off. It's problematic. And when you think about R. Kelly, remember, he beat one case. But as you say, Tammy, it's a new environment now. It's a new day now. And I think, it's going to be a new set of rules. I don't understand, why Trey Songz doesn't understand that as a public figure. He has even a higher standard he's got to keep.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Dr. Oleka?
I agree. Keep your hands to yourself. Laughter is not consent, and just leave people alone, and I think you'll be fine.
Leave people alone. I don't understand why people don't understand that. You teach your kids that. Keep your hands to yourself. Looks like Future wants to have more babies. In a recent interview, Future was asked about wanting more children. He stated, yes, by my wife. You know what I'm saying? If I ever get married, I want to have kids by my wife. And of course, it could be like 3 because I never had more than 1 kid by a girl. He then went on to say, so like if I had 2 by her, then it's like more than I had. So I feel like it would be more special. Future has 8 children with 8 different women, one including Sierra. Is it time for Future to settle down with one woman and have more children? Or is it time for him to keep procreating across the country like Nick Cannon?
I'd like to take the time to speak to the female soulmates. Stay away from Future. There's no future in Future. If he's just figuring this out, that having kids with your wife is a good thing to do. You might want to keep it moving. And what's so funny is people have so much to say about Sierra because she leveled up and got with Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson never had to be taught this.
It ain't no future in your front, huh?
Ain't no future in future.
Dr. Oleka.
Look, someone needs to tell this brother that having 2 more kids doesn't make you a better father. It's not like sports. Can't just get more reps in and you get better at it. You got 8 children. Like, do good with those first.
Dominique.
Keep the hits coming. Look, I feel like I am not the one to judge you. You do you. Get married, don't get married, have 10 kids, have 30. Just take care of the ones that you have. And when rappers and other celebrities have 1 million kids, they can afford it.
Yeah, I'm with you. If you can afford it. Ed, real quick.
Yeah, I'm lifting up Russell Wilson. I hope there's 7 other Russell Wilsons in Future's kids' lives.
We hope that Future creates some Russell Wilsons out here. That's business with Tammi Mack on Foxsoul.
Russell Wilson.